Yeah, it's really that so many of you are joining right now, even though we are getting into the summer break all across Europe. And when I talk about you getting into this call, I'm talking about this growing climate community. And it might well be your first time that you're joining one of our webinars, or maybe you have already joined us before. But if this is the first time, well, then please yeah, we very warmly welcomed here as we're exploring together how Scope 3 decarbonization can actually be moved from ambition to action. And as you have already seen in the title, and maybe in the description of the session, today's focus is really on the power of peer exchange to make that shift happen. And if you're wondering who we are, well, we are ClimateChoice, and we help procurement and sustainability teams to really gather all the relevant supplier-specific climate data to engage with suppliers effectively and embed Scope 3 into daily business and procurement strategies. And as many of you might also know, and Izzy, maybe we can just go to the next slide. This is really rarely simple. And why we provide the platform for this, still a lot of customers, talk about how difficult it is to navigate between fragmented data, unclear responsibilities, and growing pressure. And so progress can actually be quite tough. And this is why we launched the so-called Scope 3 Action Group, which is a 4-month guided peer learning program that brings together sustainability, but also procurement leaders to really overcome internal silos and to align strategies and accelerate climate action across their supply chain. And today I'm very excited to now welcome 3 incredible guests to this virtual stage who have been at the heart of this journey together. And this is Tabea Münch, the principal expert for sustainability at Atruvia, Christina Müller, the lead for climate environmental reporting and biodiversity at Nordex, and Isabelle Fischer, our Scope 3 Action Group program lead at ClimateChoice. So yeah, it's very cool to have all of you here today. So much ladies power basically on one virtual stage together. So maybe just kicking it off, how are you guys doing today? Izzy, how has your day been so far?
So far, yeah, quite busy, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to this webinar. So all good on my side.
And Tabea, what about you? How has the day been treating you besides the little hustle that we experienced getting you on the call?
Because of a little technical difficulty, but here we are. So I'm very much looking forward to discussing Scope 3 with everyone. Hello.
Hi. And Christina, last but not least, I know that you just came back from vacation. So how is the energy?
Still good. I think now that we finally made it in here, looking forward to the discussion.
Very good. And I mean, we will be hearing more of the two of you, so Tabea and Christina, in just a little bit. But we will actually kick it off with a short introduction by Isabelle to the Scope 3 Action Group. But before we do this, I just want to also remind everybody in the call that you could also not see this so much as a webinar, but really as a room for discussion. So if you navigate with your mouse towards the bottom part of your screen here in Zoom, you can find also the possibility to drop your questions and comments into the chat box at any point in time. And we will then also try to answer as many as possible of them throughout the session or also afterwards. And with that, I would say, Izzy, why don't we begin with your input, walking us a little bit through what the Scope 3 Action Group is all about and how it then also helps companies move from strategy to impact before we jump into the panel discussion of our 2 alumni.
Yes, then also a very warm welcome from my side. As Josepha already said, my name is Isabelle Fischer. I'm the Scope 3 Action Group lead here at ClimateChoice for the Scope 3 Action Group, a 4-month practical learning journey for the acceleration of supply chain decarbonization. And I'm very happy to have the honor now to give you some more insights on the program and what it is actually about. Briefly, before we jump into it, also, just a quick overview what we at ClimateChoice are actually doing. Josepha already mentioned it a bit, but also to give you an overview of the climate intelligence platform that we have developed over the last years. I mean, I've been part of ClimateChoice for almost 4 years now, so I'm very familiar with our vision, which is making every buying decision a climate choice. Also, if you ever wondered where this name comes from. And yeah, it's an AI-based climate intelligence platform that really helps you to automate the analysis of your supplier data and also the supplier climate maturity. And it also helps you to make then, of course, informed decision-making for your climate action and further engagement approach with your suppliers. And with this, talking about data and scope 3, I actually wanted to show you like some of the quotes that I collected actually before the last scope 3 action group that we started in March. So I asked them like, why do you want to join the scope 3 action group? And you can see it's already like some of the quotes that I show here, they are quite similar to one another. It's a lot about like data, engagement, but also talking about transparency. So just to name a few, for example, we have here improved data quality for scope 3 calculation, or I want to engage my suppliers. I want to get more primary data. I want to gain deeper insights into supplier processes and also the current status. So here, also talking about transparency and pretty much what's going on in my supply chain. So to give you like a sneak peek, what is the motivation for most of the participants in the Scope 3 Action Group? But with this, I also wanted to bring you some numbers up front. So this is from the BCG Climate Transition Barometer from this year. And it actually says that 88% of European mid-size companies consider decarbonization as important or even as crucial. So yeah, it means the mindset is there. It has been there for a while, but only a few still act when it comes to Scope 3. And it's actually your opportunity now to become one of the leading companies when it comes to Scope 3 action. And also another number that I wanted to show is that next to regulations, actually the client pull or client demand is now the second most cited decarbonization driver. So I mean, talking about emissions and like what you do for the climate and climate protection is of course not only your own risk when it comes to aligning with the 1.5 degree target, but it's also the risk of your client. So we experience it, of course, with a platform as our climate intelligence platform, more and more that, client polls are a high driver to work on your own climate protection, but also to share this data with your clients. And perhaps you have also experienced it the other way around as someone who has already requested their suppliers to share more data and also like especially emissions data. And yeah, I think it's very clear also looking at these numbers, but also like, I mean, the reason why we're here together is like that companies really need to take action now. Already for a while, actually. But there are still like key challenges that everyone faces, when it comes especially to their supply chain. So talking about Scope 3, we collected here like the major challenges that we see, and these are also the topics that we had, as like guiding topics or guiding challenges for the Climate Transformation Summit last month. It really much starts with like translating climate targets into Scope 3 actions. So actually from having the targets and then really getting into work that you want to do, creating a business case also for your Scope 3, which then also always comes down to engaging suppliers at scale for your decarbonization, having really like hands-on data from your suppliers. And aligning, of course, internally. This is something, especially with the Scope 3 Action Group, that we experience a lot, that the alignment between sustainability and procurement teams is not always on the level where it should be, like talking about Scope 3, but also something where the Scope 3 Action Group really supports this process. And then also not just aligning, but also integrating carbon into procurement. So not talking about just a mindset shift, but also like exact like numbers or KPIs that you can also integrate into existing systems. And then, of course, building reliable data infrastructure to also track the process, but of course also the progress. And yeah, with this, Josepha also mentioned it, like it was the idea to join forces. And it was also one of the main drivers to set up the Scope 3 Action Group. It actually derived from the Climate Transformation Summit 2023, so 2 years ago, when we thought, okay, it's not enough to bring everyone together like once a year for the summit, but we also want to give companies the chance to exchange, learn from one another, even beyond that. And yeah, this is when we came up with this 4-month learning journey, or practical learning journey, how we like to call it. And with this, I also want to give you a quick overview of like the main modules that we are working on, other topics. So we usually start with the first module where we really dive deep into climate data, also assess the climate performance of each of the participants, companies, to really see, okay, where you are standing at yourself. What is the climate data that is really relevant in order to manage and steer also reduction in the future, and also to think about, okay, what is really like the business case in Scope 3 for you and your company. And yeah, with this, we really set the groundwork then for your supplier engagement program. So this is like really getting active in module 2, also making use of the ClimateChoice software, of course. And then you can like start or actually scale up your supplier engagement program and collect actual data, get like a real analysis or a first analysis of like real data, and see what is the climate maturity and also the data availability in your supply chain look like. And then in the third module, it's all about making use of this data again, because this is also one of the questions that we also get very often, like, okay, we have this and that information about our suppliers. How do I translate this really like into an action roadmap now? And this is what we dive into in the third module. Thinking about like concrete measures that you can take in the next month, and also like KPIs to hit for the next year. And then you also see in the blue bar like our 3 pillars of the program, which is education, networking, and implementation. And with this, I wanted to dive into each of this really quickly. So the educational factor is, of course, that we from ClimateChoice always like to share all the learnings and insights that we already gained in like 4 Scope 3 action groups that we already went through. But of course, we also have like external partners that host master classes for different topics. And just to name a few, for example, we have a masterclass with 5 Glaciers Consulting. They are sustainability consulting, and here we dive deep into like a best practice, or like a practical example on how to use emission intensities for your Scope 3 calculation. I mean, in a time where everyone is looking for like perfect PCF data, the reality usually looks quite different. So emission intensities can actually be a right step into the right direction if you want to use more primary data. But then, for example, AMC Group, they are a procurement consultancy focused on sustainable procurement. And here we also have a masterclass that is focused on like the setup of your procurement process and where and how it makes sense to integrate climate already in existing processes. Then, of course, the networking factor, I mean, we always have like a group of like participants from like different industries, from different company sizes. And the idea is here, of course, to exchange on challenges, on learnings, but also get perhaps like a good tip from like-minded people that are all on the same journey with you in this group, and that are all doing like each of the steps at the same time. And then most importantly, I would say like the implementation. So of course you exchange a lot, but you work also on like really like tangible results, and also your individual Scope 3 master plan. So what does that actually mean? It means that you can level up your supplier engagement program, or start your supplier engagement program where you can actually acquire auditable supplier data. With the ClimateChoice software, you also have the chance to automate analysis of your supplier climate maturity, to then also be able to make like a data-based decision for further supplier engagement. But then you also develop actionable next steps to also get like stakeholders on board. And with this, you already also see here on the right yeah, like a few ideas or like a sneak peek into the Scope 3 master plan, like some of the tools and templates that we provide in order to set up your roadmap and really get into action and KPI planning here. And yeah, with this actually to mention, like for all the participants, there's always like the climate intelligence platform included if you're part of the program. And yeah, we last month we actually finalized the 4th cohort of the Scope 3 Action Group. So yeah, really cool to see how many people have already gone through the program. And with this, I mean, especially for us, after the Scope 3 group is always like before the next Scope 3 group. And to give you an idea how the program overview look like, here are some of the dates. So the next Scope 3 Action Group will actually start in September, on September 18th. We have our kickoff event here in Berlin. And then there's also like the final event, which we always host in Berlin. And then in between, it's like 6 online workshops, each of them like 2 hours, where we have the master classes, where we have like the moderated exchange, but where we also give like inputs and next steps. And then there's always like on the Friday afterwards, like a 1-hour tutorial, which is where a bit more like informal and practical, and where we really get into examples and exchange and also like answer more questions. So yeah, if you join the Scope 3 Action Group, of course, you become part of the network. And since the session today is really about like how network effects and the community can support your Scope 3 efforts, it also gives you like more benefits. So first of all, you get invites to also exclusive Scope 3 community meetups, and which we host like all over Germany. And then also online alumni sessions that we have regularly. You can benefit from discounted tickets for the Climate Transformation Summit. And of course, you gain a digital Scope 3 infrastructure to manage your supplier data at scale. And if you, with this, I actually give back to Josepha for now. But more questions later then.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for really setting the scene here so nicely. And I think, I mean, what you've also been showing is, of course, it's about gaining knowledge. It's about gaining tactical skills on how to set up not only supply engagement, but then also decarbonization action. But it's really also about afterwards finding out how you can not only make progress, but then also measure it. And I think this is also something that we will be looking at. And I'm very much looking forward to see how this actually works out in practice, because I guess, I mean, we might have, people here on the call that are just getting started. Some others are maybe already deeper into Scope 3 actions. I think one of the key topics we also want to discuss today is for whom is actually this group. And yet it doesn't really matter, I guess, what kind of maturity level you are. When you don't do it alone, you can really accelerate your efforts. And this is where I would love to then also get back on the stage here now, Tabea and Christina, and the 2 alumni that Izzy was so nice to invite today, because you have been facing, I guess, some challenges, roadblocks, opportunities, of course, also a lot in your companies when you've been setting up your own Scope 3 journey. And the 2 of you have also used the group to build, I guess, from an internal momentum to then really also real supplier action. So I guess, I mean, I'm not the only one interested to find out who you are. So maybe, Tabea, we can get started with you, kicking us off with just a short introduction about yourself, and of course also Atruvia. It's quite a hidden champion, I guess, yeah. Way bigger than one might think. And
very true.
The name is not so commonly known. So over to you.
Yes, thank you, Josepha. Yeah, hi everyone. Yes, indeed. I think most of you will not have heard of my company. However, many of you might be customers. Who knows? My name is Tabea. I'm a principal expert for sustainability at Atruvia, and who we are is basically we are the digitization partner for the German co-op banks, which means that we make software, we set up the IT infrastructure for the 2nd largest banking group in Germany. So our customer base are banks, hence why you might have not heard of us. But yeah, so I had the Scope 3 action there, and also lots of like internal sustainability topics that relate to that.
Cool. And I mean, you've just been starting to touch a little bit upon it, but maybe you can, give us a little bit more of an insight of what your role of principal expert sustainability is actually all about.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough with sustainability, I think, for many people, because it's kind of a role that I think is emerging in many ways, and so many new topics always kind of emerge. And with Scope 3, finally, I think everyone has now accepted that it needs to be like a staple in our processes and in the way that we handle business in general, and especially, supplier management and procurement, etc. So I actually started in procurement originally in my company and did sustainability there, and now just kind of trying to keep all the different working streams together and to really harmonize that with my colleagues that also do sustainability within the company.
Nice. Thank you so much. And we will be looking at the intersection that you're also building there in just a little bit. But before we do so, I would also like to hand it over now to Christina. So same for you. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an introduction to Nordex and your role.
All right, sure. Yeah. So hi, nice to meet you everyone again. My name is Christina. I'm working for the Nordex Group as a functional lead for climate, environmental reporting, and biodiversity. So I think that also says a lot already about what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. In general, the Nordex Group is a onshore wind turbine manufacturer headquartered in Hamburg. So you might have seen one or the other turbine already when you're somewhere driving along the highway, for instance. So we are basically manufacturing, producing, installing, and eventually also maintaining turbines. We're not running them. So that's then like the RWEs, Vattenfalls, etc. of the world are our customers. And I think one of the key issues that we also have, or like the key problem, let's say challenges that we face within sustainability every now and then at Nordex is, well, often we are perceived as green by nature, but that is obviously way far too short-sighted. And so within my daily activities, I'm basically focusing on identifying and establishing synergies between climate and biodiversity topics lately. But that also means when we're looking at climate specifically, dealing with all scopes 1, 2, 3. And I'm basically managing the strategy to achieve our science-based targets at a global level. Being a manufacturing company, one can imagine that Scope 3 emissions are 99% of our corporate carbon footprint. So it comes naturally that we really need to think of how to engage with our suppliers on the way to tackle and mitigate Scope 3 emissions.
Wow. That doesn't sound like a job where you would ever feel boredom, I guess. Also quite a huge scope that you're looking at. And I think you're also working at one of these companies. It doesn't matter when you go on vacation, if you're driving a car next to or on the Autobahn, that you're always reminded of where you're working at, looking at the wind turbines then. So no way to escape your employer, I guess. But yeah, thanks so much also to you for joining. And I mean, you started to also go a little bit already into your scope of activities, Christina, when you now mentioned that Scope 3 makes up such a big chunk because you are in the manufacturing industry. And yet I would love to ask you, like turning back the time before joining the group, can you maybe feel back into what did Scope 3 actually feel like inside your company? Was it already by then a strategic priority? Was it more coming from the like compliance side of life that people started to talk about Scope 3? Maybe you can relate a little bit to it, give us some insights in how then also the Scope 3 Action Group changed this.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix. So if I think about how it was essentially prior to starting really looking into Scope 3 engagement, it was probably really mostly a reporting burden, although one that we basically decided to do like on our own voluntarily. It was not something that we had to do. So it might have, maybe it's more like a mixed thing. So on the one hand, reporting burden, on the other hand, also a bit of strategic priority when we're looking at our current sustainability strategy. So that one was, it came into force back in 2022. And since then, we knew that we needed to tackle Scope 3 as well. I mean, we're doing the corporate carbon footprint for quite a while already. So we were well aware of the impact for quite a while as well. Yeah, that obviously also included supply chain engagement. But on the other hand, so yeah, it was just very complex, right? So if you look at all the different Scope 3 Scope 3 categories, it can somewhat overwhelm you with complexity, and then also knowing that you need to actually also invest the capacities that might not be there directly. So I feel like we somewhat lacked a bit of a structured approach to include supplier-specific data that was still missing. And also the ownership within the company was still somewhat unclear. Well, then we had our science-based targets. So there was no way out, right? So like we've set near-term and net zero long-term science-based targets, including Scope 3. So we needed to come up with a solution how to at least like start tackling that aspect. So if we think about, well, looking back to the past year, I think now we've gained an idea of how to start supplier engagement, and not only receiving the data actually, but also working with the data, which is also quite important, obviously. So to really make it like a useful measure for you. So when I'm thinking about the Scope 3 action group, I think it really gave us a bit the impetus to really start investigating our supply chain from a decarbonization perspective, and also like having a tool at hand that supports you. So without needing to spend extra time thinking about potential questions relevant for the RFI, for instance. And so I think another aspect, and that might really also go into like peers, is, well, this also involved looking for our partners in crime within the company. And I guess that's not a real big surprise to look, for instance, at procurement, that, well, sustainability alone can't do it alone. That's the thing. So I think it has really become clear that it's not only a topic that the sustainability team needs to work on, but it's also gaining traction now within the entire company, specifically looking at, well, procurement on the one hand, but also product strategy and engineering. So really those departments that are somewhat involved with our products and hence the materials that we are sourcing. So I think, yeah, collaboration has really gained traction now as well.
Wow, you've mentioned so many aspects, and I think this is also so interesting, right? When the discussion, quite some time ago was all about target setting, how to do it right. Now I think this is exactly the next piece that you've been looking at, right? So looking at, okay, what can we actually do to achieve them? And in order not to get overwhelmed, of course, you need structure in order to prioritize, in order to then also really have, I think this structured discussion with your suppliers so that it is of mutual benefit, because this is also one of the topics that Izzy was mentioning in the beginning, that we hear a lot from suppliers also who are like, okay, if we are just reporting and if this is a one-way street, well then, to be honest, why should we, further on give you our data if nothing is then actually happening? So I guess this is really finding out together where's the biggest bang for the buck, is one of the key topics that you mentioned. But then also internally, there's alignment across teams, getting in procurement. And then, of course, also ownership. I mean, somewhere money needs to come from, and somebody needs to put the working hours behind it to drive it all forward. So thanks for this very holistic overview. And talking about this positioning or the intersection of procurement and sustainability, I mean, Tabea, this is exactly, I think, your sweet spot, right? This is what you're navigating the entire time. And so maybe you can also reflect a little bit on what initially motivated you and or the company of Atruvia to actually join the Scope 3 Action Group.
I mean, many things, to be honest. I mean, all of what Christina just said, to be honest, as well. I mean, for us, it was really it really enabled us, or me more specifically, to kind of kickstart our Scope 3 journey in depth, because of course, Scope 3 is nothing new, right, for people in general, but also for companies of our size especially. But kind of ownership is one big word that really just made me nod when Christina was talking. But also just the very kind of what Izzy was presenting in the beginning, really, just how the the journey is structured in that way just was very very alluring to me, to kind of really set it up from the beginning, and also not just gathering data, but actually using it, and just kind of having a peer group as well, where you can kind of, you know, soundboard some things, and where you have people from, I mean, we're a good example, Christina and I, like very different industries, right? I mean, you know, like a production side, and also in my case, I mean, we develop software, we run the software in the data centers, but we're not like building anything physical really. But how the challenges are very, very similar, I think. And the more and more we kind of talk and develop this community as well, I think it's so funny to see how we all have the same battles, just in very different industries and on very different scales of companies as well. Yeah, so for us, the motivation, or for me more specifically, really came from wanting to implement our kind of scope 3 journey, or I mean, to develop a scope 3 journey in the first place, and then also really be able to implement that deep within company processes, and to really get people on board, and to know how we can enable our colleagues as well. Because I think often when scope 3 action isn't as effective as we would like, maybe, it's not about people not wanting to do it. It's often just about it being a bit abstract in many cases, I think, and it's really being like a difficult thing to start when you're just kind of, well, I know what scope 3 is, I know my main suppliers, and I know, you know, where like our hotspots are really, but what am I going to do with that information now? It feels very overwhelming for many people, I think. So for us, for me, it was really like a big motivator to kind of find people that I can go on that journey with, and that you can kind of share knowledge with, and have the support in this case from ClimateChoice and in that structure, of course. And that was just very helpful for us to kind of get a foot in the door when it comes to like a structured scope 3 implementation.
Yeah. I think, I mean, goodwill is there a lot, right? This is what we see. I mean, the intention is there, but then, how to move from the intention really into the action. And we will be talking about the road mapping also in just a little bit. But I guess what also comes out of your different statements is that there's different maturity levels, of course, when you can join the scope 3 action group. So Izzy, maybe also you as the lead. Actually, we have this internal saying of the scope 3 action Izzy, which I love. So you being the scope 3 action Izzy and the program lead for the group, you've been working with companies from various industries and maturity levels. Can you maybe resume for us what's the most common why? So the core reasons why companies might be joining. I know we've been hearing a lot, but maybe you can just, name a couple of aspects that come across, at various points.
Yes, sure. I think, I mean, I already showed like a little sneak peek with the little quotes that I had earlier. But what I can say, I think, is that it always narrows down to like 3 major areas, I would say. So first of all, and I think this is like the probably most common, or the reason that I hear most often, is that companies want to start with scope 3, and especially want to improve their scope 3 calculation. So talking about, okay, getting more primary data for the calculation, but also generally like wanting to know what's going on in their supply chain, like getting an idea, like how do suppliers actually do in terms of climate, like how does my supplier base look like, which suppliers already have like a high climate maturity, or where do I need to put like some more effort into in order to develop them or support them on their climate journey. So I think this is like one of the main reasons. Then, of course, as Christina mentioned, like you have set a climate target, and this is then a driver, at least to get into action. And you really need to track your progress, or perhaps you even have an engagement target by SBTi, and you need to know, okay, who of my suppliers also already have a science-based target, with whom do I need to talk? And then also talking about climates, I think the third most important one is like transition planning. So how do I actually operationalize scope 3? How do I manage reaching my targets? How do I set KPIs? How do I manage like the reduction efforts that I also put into? And because you managed, as you said, that there's like different maturity levels also in companies joining. Yeah, so I also see that a lot. I mean, the starting point from where they want to join the group is quite differently. So we have those that are just starting by, or they have their first Scope 3 calculation and they know, okay, these are our hotspots. This is where we want to start. But then also some companies that join, they already started perhaps with like face-to-face interviews with their suppliers, or they set up a questionnaire. They use Excel to track all the data, and then at some point they realize, okay, like especially if you want to scale, even Excel has their limits. They are really interested, of course, also in trying out the ClimateChoice platform. There's like different reasons to join, but I would say it doesn't really matter like which industry or also like which maturity level a company is. I would always recommend it's good to have a Scope 3 calculation and already know like your most your highest emittance. But there's something to learn for everyone who starts the program. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And you've now been talking about the Scope 3 calculation. And I guess, Christina, what you mentioned also in the beginning, right? This like mutual beneficial conversation can actually only happen when you also go down to the supplier specific data level, so to say, because this is where you can get specific and really plan for the most effective activities together and co-develop actually also with your suppliers. Yet this is also a huge challenge, not only because of the vast amount of data that you might get, but already like getting that data in the first place. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit from your point of view on why, particularly at Nordex, supply-specific data is so critical for your Scope 3 strategy? And then also, what are the most challenging aspects about it?
Yeah, I think it might not even be like a very specific Nordex approach. I think it's really, mostly like if you're dealing with like large amount of materials, I guess it's always important. We feel like, and I think that's also the like understanding like when we're talking to others that are dealing with Scope 3. Well, on the one hand, obviously we need to pull together with our suppliers to achieve Scope 3 emission reductions. So somewhat like inquiring for their data is the first step. And at the same time, without supplier-specific data and the respective primary data baseline, it's almost impossible to track down improvements at some point. So if like our suppliers are improving their data, but we can't use their data, or like are improving their carbon footprint, but then we don't get their carbon footprints, you don't see it, obviously. Also, like apart from that, if you're looking at database greenhouse gas emission factors, we've already noticed that sometimes they are rather, or like often they are rather conservative, and especially if there's a large bandwidth of such factors for certain material or product. So we actually had that for one product for one material at some point, like only getting one one supplier specific carbon factor in, and I still find that quite striking. It's a couple of years ago, but could reduce our corporate carbon footprint by 3%. So
by 30, you said?
By 3%, but still 3% is quite a bit. So if it's only from one supplier. So I think that's really where we noticed, okay, supplier specific data is critical. But then I think why it's so challenging is, I think that's what you've also mentioned already. It's like the different maturity levels, right? So prior to the Scope 3 action group, we would have also started a bit with like, it's the mere Excel file, right? So ad hoc email-based RFIs with a couple of suppliers. But then we've also found out that many of our suppliers are still in the beginning of their climate journey. So that also makes it a bit difficult, like at looking at the level of greenhouse gas emission factors that we can then actually get and that they can provide. So it's, I think, this common journey that we now need to start with. And that's at the same time, the challenge as well. So really getting the data in then.
And can you maybe say also, was there one first, like breakthrough that you remember that happened when you've been like, okay, finally, this is what I wanted, or this is how I imagined it to be when you joined the group? To really then also set this process up of getting supply-specific data at scale.
I think one of maybe really the first breakthrough step was really also getting global sourcing fully on board. So again, I've mentioned it already, I can only mention it once again. So despite the limited time that we all have, limited capacities, teaming up with procurement and convincing them of the benefits was, I think, really the first and major breakthrough, because eventually it was them then inquiring with our initial supplier set for climate data, then via the climate intelligence platform. And what was quite surprising but also striking to me was that actually our director of global sourcing would then request weekly updates from our part about the suppliers' feedback, and would really be behind on his own, like reminding them, like his managers, to like remind our suppliers again. And eventually that was then after the action group already, so we continued after this 4-month schedule, that we would really then also get a response rate of 85% of our first set. So that really helped to then get further going with scope 3 engagement.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe Tabea, I mean, Christina now mentioned also how important it was to then also get global sourcing on board. Can you maybe, I mean, I guess now we have understood, right, that supply-specific data is a big topic, but how do you align the various data needs? So from procurement and sustainability teams, where it's really, I mean, ranging, right? This is always what we get in the discussions. I mean, the needs behind the data is also quite different. So from emission management over to reporting to smart procurement decision making. How do you navigate these different aspects of data needs?
That's the big question, I think. I mean, that's again such a daunting task, I think, for many people, me included in the beginning. I think what is very important is to kind of really sit down with everyone who really has any kind of buy-in, hopefully, when it comes to scope 3 and to emissions in general, even like the scope 1 and 2 teams, right? If you have those, luckily. I think it's really important to kind of make it actionable in a way that you need transparency first, obviously, and also not kind of having the yardstick to use of, okay, we need transparency, like as specific as Christina just said, on all of our suppliers, because for most companies that's just not realistic. But to actually just get the process going, get your foot in the door, and really gain transparency and gain buy-in on certain projects or certain suppliers, and then kind of take that and go with that to be it your procurement team or however it is structured within your own company or group even, and then also talk to your strategy team and talk to your policy implementation team, and just really make sure that all these approaches really fit together. Because I think where you can run really into trouble is when kind of your policy or whatever, they have like a certain view of your guidelines that you need to follow, and then your corporate strategy team maybe has a different one, and then procurement has another one, and you as a sustainability team have a whole different approach and a whole different goal. And I think it sounds very simple, but I think it doesn't happen nearly enough, because everyone is kind of busy with daily business, that you really have to align all of those approaches and align all of the strategies and make sure that they like feed into each other, and then it's not as abstract as a task, I believe. And then you really need to take along your team that does your supplier engagements and that does your supplier management, and really kind of communicating rather more than too little, I think, and really kind of taking everyone along on the journey from as early as you can, really, because then it doesn't get too kind of fancy and abstract for everyone. Really explaining why are we doing this on a company level, but also on a policy level, etc. Like how many stakeholders are actually interested in what we're doing in scope 3 and how important is it? How does it affect us? Just like a classic like materiality approach, really. To really just make it transparent, why are we doing this, in what way are we doing this, what do we hope to get out of it, and then really just get going with some like pilots, for example, right, with like just like a few suppliers, with your main suppliers maybe, or just with some like suppliers that you have a good relationship with, maybe, where you're going to get some data, to understand how it works and to kind of understand how you can give that data that you gathered into the company for different things. And I think that is a very, again, seemingly easy step maybe, but I think that's really where a lot of people get frustrated. And it can be frustrating, don't get me wrong, but where you really need to put the emphasis, because no data, no matter how how great it is and how high quality it has. If you don't know how to use it, it's not going to do anything for you. And so to kind of make sure before you gather data, you know what your goal is to do with that data. So I think that's a very kind of important thing to make it actionable for everyone within the company.
Yeah, I think what you also mentioned here, I mean, it's this huge chunk of internal change management that you actually need to then also develop for yourself conceptually, but then also, of course, implement it. So I guess this is where a lot of different stakeholder discussions are on the spot. And also one aspect that I liked about what you just mentioned is not to see existing processes basically as a hurdle or as a blocking point, but really to understand, okay, so how can we improve these processes? How can we enrich?
Oh, definitely.
And then look at, okay, so what data do we need in order to then also make this happen, in order to really integrate it? And there was actually a very, nice case study also presented by you, how you are aligning global strategies with your governance structures, with your data infrastructure at the Climate Transformation Summit. So anybody who is interested in it, you can also find it on our webpage as a short case study there. Yeah, thank you so much. And I mean, so now talking also about this whole chunk of data that you can collect, but then how to also get the insights from it. Izzy, maybe you can also elaborate a little bit on how the climate intelligence platform can actually help our our current cohorts and alumni in order to set up a more structured approach in their data infrastructure.
Yes. I think one of the main points Tabea actually just mentioned, so like it doesn't matter like how good the data is or how much data you have, you really also need to be able to manage it and work with it. And I think this is really where the climate intelligence platform really supports. So first of all, like structuring this whole process and also automate this whole process of supplier engagement, but then also help you align like several teams on this information that you're actually gathering. And then I also really like what you said, like enriching processes, like existing processes with like better and especially also with like more data. So not like building something completely new, but thinking about, okay, how can I use this data actually to integrate into what we already have? And then, I mean, generally talking again about this whole, or I guess it's the general joy of digitization, like at some point doing everything yourself just takes up too much time and resources. And if we're talking about scope 3 and supply chains that have like hundreds or thousands or 10,000s of suppliers, we are just talking about the sheer amount of data. So I think at some point it's just not as easy like to handle all of this easily. But talking explicitly about the scope and the climate intelligence platform, I mean, it really helps you to get like an easy overview of your suppliers, like who of the other suppliers that you're currently engaging with. Also, what is the reporting structure behind? So we also support like showing, okay, is the reporting or the data based on this company level, or is there like a reporting company, like a group on group level, for example? You have easy access to the analysis of the climate maturity of your suppliers. You have access to verified emission data. So this means also that for all of the data points that we have on the platform, there's always like a trace back, like where it's coming from. But you can also, and I think this is something Christina mentioned before, it's also important, of course, to see what's the progress, like how do my suppliers actually develop, and to also see this and track this in order to then also be able to use it again for your own calculation and your own management. So I guess like generally having a tool at hand and like real data really helps you align internally and really getting into actual steps.
Yeah, thank you. No, very good. And I guess also what you mentioned with the supplier engagement, I mean, it's also a low friction, I would say, protocol that is behind it in order to get the data really on climate maturity from your suppliers. I guess this is also what we hear a lot, right? So instead of overwhelming people with too many questions, just really looking at what is necessary for us in order to build up a climate smart supply chain. Because I think this is one of the key questions to how not to get, like lost by wanting more and more and more data points if in the end you can't really handle them and can't find out anything knowledgeable for you. But Izzy, maybe you can also come back a little bit on some sort of tools, templates, structures that people walk away with in order to help them align teams internally, build the momentum, or then also scale their Scope 3 work after the program. What are the key components? You showed it in the beginning on some of the slides, but just to remember what this was all about.
Yes, sure. I mean, first of all, you have the chance to either start or level up your supplier program. So really get into action here, activating your suppliers, getting some first analysis and some real data. I mean, this is a lot what people already ask for when they joined the group, and there's also no limit. So you can activate as many suppliers as you want to, even though we usually recommend to start with those that make up 80% of your emissions. But then of course there's also the Scope 3 action plan. So I also showed it earlier in my slides, like very briefly. It's your individual strategy paper that you work on during the time of the group. So it's based on real data that you actually collected, based on your own company, based on your supply chain. And then based on this, really you have the chance to develop like concrete measures that are really targeted to the different maturity levels of your suppliers. So here talking again about how do we actually make use of the data that we collect. And then, actually leave the group with like a complete roadmap and next steps you want to take, KPIs that you have defined that you can track over the next years in order to see, okay, how do you progress also in terms, with your Scope 3 efforts here. But then also, I think you said like, or you asked like, how does it help you to scale up? Having those tangible results also. And I mean, we're talking about like peer exchange, of course, and like networking and learning, but with it also comes, and I think this is also what distinguishes it probably from other programs, is that you really have like those results, like the data that you have and these roadmap that you develop. So I really like to refer to it as the tip of the iceberg. So you have set the groundwork, but with this you actually have the chance to really go deeper into it. Then the real work starts.
Yeah. And maybe I would like to take up that point of the Scope 3 master plan, because this is also something that you mentioned. Can you maybe explain what the Scope 3 master plan is all about and how it helps you align internally and clarify what to do next? You're still muted.
There you go. Now you can hear me. Hello. I mean, it's really just like the summary of everything we just talked about and everything that's kind of the issues or the roadblocks, or then hopefully the stepping stones, right? Not roadblocks anymore. So it was really interesting for me to see kind of how it fits all together, and really like taking the time of going from our own like CO2 performance and stuff into kind of figuring out which suppliers to engage with, into kind of actually like figuring out our vision, because of course everyone knows, oh no, Scope 3 emissions are bad, right? But that's not really everything that there is. You need to get a bit more specific when you actually want to take management on board, for example. So to actually kind of drill down on our own impact and where we want to be in a year and where we want to be in 3 to 5 years, and to be realistic about that, but also be realistic in the way of being very specific about challenges and about risks as well. And I think what's so important is that you're being very transparent with yourself and with your colleagues in what is actually realistic for us, and which internal and external roadblocks do we have that we need to get over, and also what are the company goals, and kind of coming back to merging the different approaches within the company, what is actually our company goal, maybe a group goal, maybe something even bigger, and what are the individual strategies within our departments and within our teams, and to actually figure out and to kind of gather all of that, and then to analyze it and see, okay, does all of this actually align with what we're trying to do here? And then also, of course, look into like supplier goals and kind of what our suppliers are already doing, and maybe where we can collaborate with certain suppliers, and maybe if there's some we need to phase out at some point, because that's also a very long-term process, right? I don't know, so kind of getting all of that together and actually channeling that into a roadmap, which was, you know, at the end, hopefully for all of us, kind of the result of like the master plan, has been very helpful for us to communicate how we can make it actionable. And also, of course, you need that as an argument to get funding and kind of to get people power and to get time and to get access to different teams and to your supplier base, for example. So if you just say, oh, you know, I want to like reach out and see what they're doing in the emissions, that's not really gonna, like, no one's gonna say, yeah, sure, let's do that. You sound like you know what you're doing, right? So you need a bit more specific, to be more specific, I think. And so the action plan, or like the master plan, really enabled us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, in German you have this den Wald vor lauter Bäumen nicht sehen, that you don't see the forest because of all the trees. And I guess this is what breaks it down, how to take a decision really if you wanted to engage or not, or put funding behind it if you don't really understand what steps are behind it, right? Because it sounds so abstract always.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, yeah, thank you. And maybe to just finish it off, then also looking at the time, Christina, can you maybe share one aha moment or a milestone during or after the program, and maybe also thinking about the like context of peer learning? What was the biggest outcome for you there?
Sure, yeah. Maybe one aha moment that didn't really have a lot to do with peer learning, but was just very interesting. So it could be like, it could also be just an interesting coincidence. But so after we've like reached out to our first supplier set, one of our key key suppliers actively reached out to us to like jointly drive greenhouse gas emission reduction. So it was not actually us really needing to go into supplier engagement, but them proactively going into customer engagement with us. And the outcome of that is at the moment that we're really meeting on a quarterly level. It started with like discussing scope 1 and 2 measures, which eventually also means, well, that's our scope 3 measure, like emissions. And soon we will also go and discuss with them scope 3, because apparently they also have a supplier engagement program with their suppliers. So it's quite interesting. And that's then again the peer learning again. So rather with outside of the scope 3 action group, admittedly, but still. And otherwise, I think like really when looking into peer learning also from the scope 3 action group, I think it was really helpful actually not to, like, because we're always in our industry bubble somehow, and we are all facing the same issues, but then looking at cross-industry partners in crime, so to say, and also understanding what has worked maybe for one company in a completely different industry, but that you might also somewhat be able to translate for your own sake then. So this, I think, outside the box thinking would really help me in this context, looking at the exchange with the like other participants of the group.
Yeah, thank you. Tabea, would you like to add something really quick to it?
There we go. No, I mean, I can only kind of agree with what Christina just said. I mean, I was both surprised by kind of some of our suppliers, at least, who were kind of very proactive about the whole thing, but then also just, I think it's so helpful and so kind of enriching for the whole experience. And also, I don't know, it's very eye-opening when you actually get into the depth of the issues with people from all kinds of industries, because, you know, as Christina said, I think you can get so stuck in your own bubble sometimes that it's just very helpful. Also, you feel a lot less alone with certain things. You realize, oh, okay, it's not just my issue, not just my industry's issue. It's just like an issue with the thing I'm doing, right? And to sometimes get just very helpful tips that are just minuscule sometimes, but you just don't think about that because you're like within your own thing, just working away. So that for me just was a very fruitful thing that I'm still kind of getting things from.
Cool, thank you. And now Izzy, last but not least, what can people do now to join this group?
Yeah, it's actually quite simple. I invite you, if you're interested, to have like an individual call, so we can really dive into how does the program really support your strategy at the moment? How does it suit the challenges that you have at the moment? I'm really happy to have like a personal conversation with those that are interested. And then registration is open until end of August, I would say. I think it's August 31st, so that the group starts then September 18th with the kickoff in Berlin.
Nice. Thank you. I love the discussion and all the good mood. And I guess this is also what comes out of having partners in crime, not feeling alone, that you don't get demotivated, but can actually then also, feel that you're making an impact. And even if it's smaller steps at the time, and then even, or huge chunks at other times, that you can change in the world of Scope 3. And thank you, everybody, also for joining the session today. And with that, a big thank you to Christina and Tabea, and of course also Izzy for the great collaboration, not only on the webinar, but then also really, on everything that we've been walking through together so far between Atruvia, Nordex, and ClimateChoice. And I wish you all a very nice afternoon.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.